One of the things in selecting and setting up a country home site is the source of water is very important in your considerations of all of the needs in a country setting to consider the water source. Many people have wells, and of course it requires a pump to pump water out of a well. This can be done with a hand pump or some other mechanical type of pump. But the ideal thing is to be able to have a spring. And if there is a spring that is up high enough above your home site or the place where the house is to be able to run the water downhill, then you have gravity-fed water in your home. This allows gravity to pull the water downhill and give you water pressure without requiring any energy or mechanized means of creating the water pressure. When you perhaps are looking for a suitable spring, you can identify where springs occur by seeing the little streams of water flowing over the ground, perhaps feeding a creek, a place where it's marshy or wet up on a hillside. Sometimes will be the characteristic that you see that indicates a spring is there. If you find some wet place or little rivulet flowing over the ground, then you can trace it back to the place where you first see the wetness or moisture and start digging into the ground. Here in this area we have a spring that is running out from the bank of the ground where the weeds are. And we're going to clear these weeds off and see where the water stream is running, the little stream from the spring, and trace it back and dig out where the spring is first coming out of the ground. And we want to go back into the ground some little ways where we have some depth in the ground, and we're going to close the spring in and demonstrate how to fix it up so that you're collecting the water coming out of that spring and running it into a pipe. And it will all be closed back over when we finish so that it will avoid debris and contamination, grasshoppers and animals, salamanders and crawdads, leaves and decaying vegetation. It will help prevent all of that from getting into the spring and contaminating the water. We will also put a gravel bed in where the water is collected to run out of the pipe, and that will help to strain and filter the water to some extent and give you a setup that will best enable the water to come out clean and collect as much of the water as possible to direct down a pipe. So our first step here is going to be to cut down these weeds and clean things out so we can see what we're working with. Now our plan of action will be to follow the little line of water that we find here in this ditch and clean this out all the way back to where we can find that it's coming out of the ground, its source where it's coming out of the ground. And then we want to dig that down and make a bowl or a basin there where the water is coming out of the ground. So we're going to try to clean this out, see what kind of water flow we're getting, and follow it. Oftentimes, as you can see here, the water is running just a little under the ground because of all the brush and vegetation that has kind of gotten matted over the top. Sometimes there'll be rocks and gravel, but a little digging will enable you to see the running water. You can just keep following that line of running water back to the spring head. Following this stream of water and digging out a spring can be rather messy and muddy, so it's a good idea to wear clothes that you don't mind getting into the mud with. Now we can see there's water running here, but we haven't gotten everything cleaned out where the source of the water is yet. There still may be lots of mud and rocks. Just takes time and work to get it all cleaned out, but we'll keep working till we get that cleaned out so we can see right where the water is originating. As you dig, you may find pockets of water, and when you open them up, it will look like a pretty large flow. But after a little bit, as those pockets empty out, then the flow will diminish back down to what it appeared to be originally, further down. So it's good to get everything dug out and eliminate those pockets of water. And when you get it cleaned out, then you can watch and see how the flow diminishes or increases or whatever it's going to do, and you can start evaluating how much flow you have. We still have a lot more work to get this cleaned out here, and then we'll get down to the point where we can have it all contained and running consistently. We can already see, as we've dug down here so far, that most of the running water is coming over here from one side, near this rock. Sometimes you'll find, if you're in an area where there is a lot of rock in the ground, that the water will be coming through seams in the rock. And so you want to get back in there as close as you can to where you can dig out the rock that you can get loose, get it into where the rock is really tight. That will help protect the area where your water is coming out of the ground. If in your digging you come across some deposits of pretty clear and thick clay, this kind of stuff here, you can squeeze it together and you can tell it's like a lump of clay, or it can be other colors, but if you can find a pretty good deposit of thick gummy clay, save some of that. It's going to be useful a little later on. You don't want any pieces of tree bark or roots or things like that in it. You want it to be as pure a deposit of clay as possible. Now we've gotten enough dug back in our spring area here, we can start getting an idea of where the water's really running. We want to distinguish between where the water's flowing from the spring and where water's just running that's draining out of the ground. One way to tell that is water that's just draining out of the ground will be cloudy, like we see right here. We can see the water moving. It's draining out of these puddles here. But now if we look back here, we see a clear stream of water that's not cloudy. As it runs down, it shows clear water coming into cloudy water. So we can see that it's clear there, and we can have a pretty good indication that that's one of the places where water is coming for our spring. There may be a few other places we can see where the water is seeping that looks clear, but we'll usually find one or two main little streams running like that, and sometimes if they're coming from a seam in the rock, they may be coming in several different places, and we may not be able to get it isolated back to just one place, but we want to get all of the areas as close together as we can. If we can keep digging back, we'll keep digging back till we can get it as close to one source as possible, but the source may be spread out a little bit along a rock seam or through several channels, but we'll go back as far as we can, and then we'll have to design a collection system that will gather from all those sources and put it into one basin or bowl area. So we'll keep cleaning here and see if we can get enough of this cleaned out to have it all consolidated down to the most central source possible. And then we need to dig down to create a basin or bowl depression where that water can collect. In a job like this, obviously it's pretty hard not to get a little muddy water or dirt or mud on your clothes or even on your hands. Some people don't like to get their hands dirty. In fact, back several centuries ago, having long fingernails was a sign that you didn't have to do manual work and get your hands dirty. That was kind of like a special status symbol for the elite in society. Another interesting fact of history that I didn't know until recently when I was doing a little research. Did you ever pause to think where the term liberal arts came from? Well, if you look it up, you can find the information. The term liberal comes from a root word that means to liberate, to free. and to give somebody liberty. Well, what are you being liberated from in liberal arts? The term arts means things that you can do for pleasure, things that maybe you would enjoy doing in your leisure time when you don't have to do any hard work. And the term liberal arts actually came from a special form of education for the aristocrats of society, or for the upper class of society, that they would be able to learn how to do things that would just be leisure time activities or enjoyable things, arts, and that they would be liberated from having to work with their hands in order to sustain themselves. They wouldn't have to get dirty. They wouldn't have to put their hands to work on anything. They could just do liberating arts, and they would be sustained by the working class in those liberating arts. So this is the kind of project that you can get involved in the country, and I like to look at this kind of work actually as more liberating than liberal arts, because it makes me independent, not to have to depend on someone else to pump my water to my house or to provide my supplies. I can become independent, and I feel more liberated in that respect. In fact, it's good to get accustomed to hard work. Country living involves hard work in many of the things that we need to do, and hard work is important in a good, healthy life. The Bible tells us that we should earn our bread by the sweat of our face, and that if any man won't work, neither should he eat. In fact, there's a good acronym that we can keep in mind in connection with hard work. If we look at each letter in the words hard work as representing a word, we could put these words with it as an acronym. Healthy attitudes, rightly directed, will obtain righteous knowledge. Hard work, it's a benefit. So think of those things as you have to do these kind of projects, and don't be afraid to get dirty and get used to some good hard work. It's healthy, it's a good outlet for frustrations. In fact, we have good counsel that tells us if we feel frustrated and unhappy and cantankerous, we should get out and chop wood or do something very active and exercise. It will help to release that tension. It helps to keep us in a good frame of mind. Now we've got things pretty well cleaned out here. We've got a good basin. Our outlet level is going to be right about this level here, so that means when we come in we'll have 8 or 10 inches or so in the lowest part of our basin, and that's excellent. Now we need to have our collection apparatus fixed up, and we're going to collect all of the parts for that, and we'll take a look at those next. Now when we are going to be heading up our spring, we want to have all our materials ready, so really you want to be sure to get the different things you'll need before you start digging, or at least before you start cleaning out your spring and ready to head it up. One of the things that you will want is a piece of pipe that can be used for collecting the water, and we have here a piece of 2-inch pipe that works very well. You can use other sizes as well, but I like to use 2-inch pipe or bigger. What we're going to do is measure the length that we need in our spring basin to be able to cover most of the distance in the spring basin. In this case, it's probably going to be not more than about 3 feet, but we'll get a measurement on that. And then when we cut it, we're going to drill holes in this piece, and we're going to drill them on the top half of the pipe all the way around, several rows of holes all the way around. And then we'll put a cap on it. We have a cap that's the right size to fit over the end. Then we'll put adapter on it. We have two adapters we're going to have to use here. We have the right size adapters to go down to a 3/4 inch pipe. We'll put those together and put those on the other end, and then we'll hook into that a piece of 3/4 inch pipe. In order to do all of those connections, we need glue and cleaner for this kind of pipe. So you want to be sure to get these things before you start so you have them all on hand and ready to go. So we want to get a measurement to see how long we need our piece of 2-inch pipe to be. We're going to be running our short or our 3/4 inch pipe, our small diameter pipe, through this little narrow place, and then we'll hook into our 2-inch pipe somewhere in here, and we can use a piece that's about 3 feet long without much trouble. So we'll cut a piece about 3 feet long. If we had a longer basin, we could use a longer piece. I've used pieces sometimes that are 4 or 5 or even 6 feet long if we have a long enough basin. But on this one, about 3 feet will be about right. So we'll measure and cut that. For this, it's good to have a hacksaw, or you can use even a carpenter's handsaw. Then we'll want to clean the ends out. You can either use a little pocket knife or some kind of a scraping tool. Clean all the little shreds of plastic off. Now we have our piece of pipe about 3 feet long. And we want to drill our holes on at least half of the pipe so we can pick out a place where some of the label imprint is, and that gives us a good idea of a straight line, and we can just start in and drill about every inch all the way down that line. We have probably about a 7/32 or 1/4 inch drill bit here. You don't want anything bigger than 1/4 of an inch. We'll drill holes about every 1 inch. You may want to do this in the back of a truck bed or on a floor where you can gather all the little plastic shavings. Then as we get that line done, we'll come around part way, about 1 inch works good, and do the same thing again. Then we'll come around another inch, do the same thing again. Come around again. Now we've gone almost halfway around. If we come around about an inch and do one more row, we'll be a little more than halfway, and that'll be just fine. We need to cover at least half of the pipe all the way around. The bottom side we can leave solid. We want to do that just all the way along the pipe. So that's what we need to do for that piece. Now we've gotten our basin dug out and we've dipped out the water. We can see where the little spring is running. And our next step is to put some clean gravel into this. You can get washed 3/4 gravel, it's oftentimes called, at a gravel pit, or whatever way you can get some gravel that's clean and it doesn't have organic matter, roots and leaves or other types of trash in it that would decompose and contaminate your water supply. You want to get good clean gravel. We're going to put gravel in there and build up the level of gravel until we get up to the level where the water is going to be running out through the pipe that we want to use for our outlet pipe. So that's our next step, is to put gravel in here. Now we're getting enough gravel in here to be able to put our collection pipe. We have the gravel getting up above the water level where the water will be running out. We want to make enough of an indentation in the gravel to be able to set our collection pipe. We'll pick out any pieces of roots or leaves that we find. Now we're going to want to put together our piece of pipe. We've got all the holes drilled and we've got our sections. We'll glue everything together and we'll fix it so that it can set right in the water there. It's important to have a good rag to clean off the ends of the pieces of plastic that you're going to be gluing together. We'll clean them off thoroughly. And then we will use our cleaner we want to be able to have our cement ready to use too. We want to carefully brush the cleaner on all the way around the edge where the fitting's going to go. Then we want to do the same thing on the cap fitting that we're going to put on the inside. And then we'll use our cement. First of all, we'll go around the end of the pipe. Then we'll run some inside the cap. Then working quickly, we want to put that on and turn it at least a quarter of a turn and then hold it tight for a few seconds till it sets. Of course, it's not real critical that this be watertight because there's no pressure here, but we'll use the same principles and techniques that you would use doing plumbing if you're going to have high pressure lines. Then on the other end, we need to clean with a cleaner again. And we'll clean our fitting in both ends. This is an adapter to go from 2" down to 1.5, and then we have another one that's from 1.5 down to 3/4, which is the size of our outlet pipe. We'll go ahead and prepare it as well. Then we'll put on the cement again, putting it on the one that is going to go inside first. And the outside one. Working quickly, then put them together and twist about a quarter of a turn. Hold it together for a few seconds. Then we can do the same with the end of the pipe. Again, twisting about a quarter of a turn, push it on tight, hold for a few seconds till it sets up. Then that gets our collection pipe all ready. Now we're going to want to add a few fittings that will run the pipe on out. And we'll have to measure them and see how long they need to be. So let's go set our pipe in and see how long our fittings need to be. We put the solid part of the pipe down at the bottom. Then as soon as the water reaches holes, it will drain into this collection pipe. We're going to need to put an elbow on the end. It will run out this way, and then another elbow that will run that way. So our first elbow will need to be right against the pipe. Then we'll need a section that goes out about 29 or 30 inches. Should work about right. You can see we're already getting water collected in it. We'll let that run out. Now we'll need to use our hacksaw and cut the pieces we need. We'll clean the end a little bit. Oops. You can do this with a pocket knife or any little square-edged tool. On the end of our pipe here we have an inside fitting, and we also have an inside fitting on our angle, so we're going to need to cut a little short piece of this to fit inside both of these inside fittings, and we can put them close together. And we need to make sure we watch where the bottom of our pipe is so we get our angle set right the way we're going to have it setting in the spring collection area. We'll go ahead and clean this and put a piece of pipe in the angle. And we'll let it set for just a few seconds while we hold it. Then we'll want to cut just enough length to go inside this pipe fitting. And clean this off. Clean it with cleaner. And we do need to clean the inside of this with cleaner, but we need to make sure that it's dry before we do that. There are some types of cement that can be used wet or dry. Most types of cement require that it's dry, so we want to be sure to dry it out good. Then we use our cleaner again. Then we can put our cement on. And again, we want to make sure we get it oriented right so that the angle is going to be coming out on the side where the bottom is set correctly. So when we're sure we've got it that way, we'll hold it there. Then we need about a 29 or 30-inch piece. We'll cut that off with a hacksaw. Clean up the ends. And we'll clean as much of any dirt that's on as we can before we use our cleaner. Now we will clean the end of this. On the inside of our fitting. Then we can put glue on this one and inside the other one. You want to be sure to twist it a little bit and then hold it in place. Then we have one more fitting to put on the end, and we want to get it oriented so it's the same level as the other one and not turning up or turning down. Then we'd have a problem. So we want to make sure we've got it lined up. Sometimes there's a little row of print on the pipe that you can use to help orient your fittings, especially if it's a long distance down the pipe. So you want to be sure if you don't have that print easily visible, you can mark it so that when you're trying to get it glued on, you don't have to take time to try to look and see where the direction should be. Now we want to make sure to orient our mark where it needs to be and hold it on, and have included our little twist. We put it on a little different, and then we make sure to twist it into the correct position. Hold it just a little bit. Now we'll put another section on the end that will give us a little extra length, so we aren't trying to work on putting fittings in when there's water coming out. This will allow us, if we have enough extra length, we can pick up the other end when we need to glue it. We can clean it off quickly with a rag and dry it good, put our fittings on, and then put it back down in the ditch. And the water will collect in the pipe while we've got it lifted up, but it allows us enough time to dry it and glue our next sections on. So we'll put enough here to allow us to do that before we put it in place, because once we put it in and start putting gravel over it, it'll be hard to move it. We won't want to move it once we get things all put in place, because we want to seal around this pipe so all the water will go in the collection part and not leak around the pipe where it comes out. We want to do everything we can to have it all in position and not have to move it any more than necessary for getting our next fittings glued on. Clean the other end. Clean it with cleaner. Clean the inside. Then glue, always making sure to glue first the piece that goes inside and then the outside part with what's left of the glue. If we glue the outside part first, then we'll have all the excess glue pushing down inside the joint rather than pushing along the pipe as we push it in. So now we'll hold that in place for a few seconds till it sets. Then we're ready to take it over and put it in place. If we have to move any gravel to get it set in place properly, we'll do that. We want to get it down as low as we can and still have it running downhill where the outlet is going to be. So now we have it set in place, and we want this section pretty level. If there's any contour, it should be only slightly downhill, but basically it's best to have it pretty much level. We can pull some of our rocks around it, enough to hold it there. Then we will get more of our buckets of rocks and put them in on top. We're going to cover the collection part all over with gravel, but we want to be very careful not to cover past the end of the collection part at this point where we've drilled all our holes. We're just going to cover that part with gravel for this point. Now we're going to push this gravel back in here. We want to develop a slope that goes up in the back and slopes gradually toward the front. But we still want enough room back up under the dirt, since we got an overhang here, to be able to push plastic all the way back up in there as far as we can. So we'll push the gravel back up in there. Now we can use just a little more gravel. And we've got our gravel just about enough back up inside that we're going to be ready to put our clay down on the part of the pipe here that's coming out, where we've pushed it as low as we had a little trench to be able for the water to drain out. We're going to push the pipe down and pack clay around it. Now it may be that where you're digging and heading up a spring you can't get clay, and you could use concrete or mortar or something like that if necessary, but you need to be able to clean out where the pipe is going to push down against hard surface as much as possible, and then pack the concrete and mortar around for enough of a distance to seal the pipe so the water will stay back behind and go into the collection pipe. That's the reason for digging a basin where the water can collect and just come up to the level where it can run out at your outlet point, and the pipe will be buried back inside and collect that water so it won't rise above that point. Now we'll get our clay and pack it in around the pipe. And we want to tamp it in good so it will seal as good as possible. You can see that already, as we've gotten that enclosed, the water is coming out the end of the pipe that we have down here. And the spring is running through the pipe already. We'll put more clay in and get this closed up good and tight. We're going to save a little of our clay. Now we're going to put in our last little bit of gravel. We'll pile it right up here. Now we have a little dip there that we're going to fill in a little bit, but we want to get our plastic in and push it right down around the pipe as much as we can. We have here some 6 mil plastic. You can use 4 mil plastic. It's good to get something with several thicknesses that will be pretty heavy. We have 4 thicknesses here. And we want it big enough to cover all of our gravel area and run out a little bit on the sides. And we're going to poke it back in as far as we can. You see how we push it down here around the pipe. Then we're going to scrape some of this gravel down in a little bit. And we're trying to keep our gravel all sloping downhill. That helps keep the plastic sloping downhill. And when we get it all covered with dirt, then if there's any moisture that seeps down through the dirt, it'll run downhill off of the plastic and it won't be as likely to get into the spring area. And the edges we'll just leave turned up a little bit. Now we're going to use our last little bit of clay, cover over the end of the plastic here. That'll help seal that down around the pipe. Then we're ready to start putting the dirt back in on top. It's important as much as possible not to put rocks against the plastic. Try to get dirt that doesn't have rocks in it. And if necessary, you may have to haul some dirt from somewhere where you can get some if you have a place close by if your dirt that you've dug out is pretty rocky. So we'll want to cover that in with dirt. Well, because our dirt is pretty rocky, we're going to put some of this dirt we brought, cover it over with a layer of that, to protect it from rocks in the dirt that we push over and put in afterwards. And we want to try to push this in as tight as we can back in the back. Help keep dirt from settling down as much from above. One more thing that we'll do here now that we're getting down here close to this step is we'll move this big rock right over in the front. That'll make a good stopper for the dirt behind it. We have a few other rocks, we can just put them around here too. This plastic we put in here won't be exposed to the outside at all. If nobody digs down and exposes it to the air, it would probably be there 100 years from now. It'll stay intact for a long time. We'll keep pushing the dirt back up under, pack it in. Now we're back here the next day, and we have all of the water from the spring coming out of the pipe. It's a small spring, the flow is not very large, but it's continuous and steady, and the water will add up as it flows. We're going to measure and see how much flow we have. We can do this one of two ways. We can either see how long it takes to fill up 1 cup, or we can measure and see how much water comes out in 1 minute. We'll measure here and see how much water comes out in 1 minute. We'll get ready to start timing, and as soon as the second hand gets to the right place, we'll stick the cup under. Now we'll just watch for 1 minute and catch all the water. The water's cleared up pretty good from the way it was when we were digging in the spring yesterday. And it's a good idea to let it run for several days before starting to use the water. Probably be good to let it run for a week before drinking it, get things flushed out. Now we're coming up to just a few seconds away from 1 minute. There we are. Now we have in our cup a little over 1.5 cups that we've gotten in 1 minute. It's going to be about between 1.5 and 1 3/4, so that'd be about 1 5/8 cups. Now we can compute and see how much that adds up to in an hour and how much in a day. Yesterday when we dug this spring out, we had to clear the weeds off and dig along the ditch, trace the spring to its source, and then dig out a basin. We put in gravel and a collection pipe. Then we put in more gravel. We closed it back over with plastic. Then we put dirt on top, and now, as you can see, it's all covered over. When we get grass planted on this and growing, there will not even be any evidence that there's a spring under the ground there, and it will be protected from runoff and from contamination. I have had the opportunity through the past 20 years or so to put in at least 10 springs, or head up 10 springs with this kind of a method, and there has never been any problem in any of those springs so far. I believe that this is a very reliable way to head up a spring, help to keep out contamination, and to allow collection of the vein of water and to keep it channeled where you can use it. In this spring here, we've measured the water and we have evaluated how much is coming out in 1 minute. We had about 1 5/8 cups of water coming out per minute. That calculates to be about 147 to 150 gallons in one 24-hour period, or a little over 1,000 gallons in 1 week. That's a sufficient amount to meet all the domestic needs of a couple, or being careful, even 3 people. So even a small spring like this, running continuously with a reservoir to collect the water and hold it for you, would be adequate to meet the water needs for a couple. One thing you might wonder is, how can you make sure that your water in a spring is going to be reliable, that it won't dry up or diminish when it gets dry? It's important to check that possibility, because sometimes when there is a lot of rain, there are places where springs appear, wet weather springs, and then after several days of dry weather, the springs will dry up and there's no more water running again until there are heavy rains. One way to check the reliability of a spring is to see how the water's running when you have had rainy weather, and then wait until there's a dry spell. When there's been a couple weeks of dry weather, or even longer, in the middle of the summer or in the fall after a long dry spell, see how much water is running from the spring. If the spring has dried up, then that's evidence that's not a reliable spring. You need to check for another one that runs year-round. Another thing that you can do is to ask some of the old-timers in the area, if there are neighbors who have lived there all of their life or for many, many years. They usually know where the springs are that have a reputation for running year-round. So it's a good idea to check with them and ask what their knowledge is about a spring that you may have been looking at, or if they know of a spring on the property that you're looking at that is known to be reliable and run year-round. Usually the springs that run when there's been a long drought gain a reputation in the neighborhoods, so it's good to check on those things. It is advisable when everything's finished and set up and the water has had a chance to flush out your spring and pipe system to get the water tested. You can either work out an arrangement with the local health department or an engineering firm, or you can get a test kit that you can use yourself. Especially it's important to make sure that you don't have contamination in your water supply that would cause problems in your health. It's good to get accustomed to hard work. Country living involves hard work in many of the things that we need to do, and hard work is important in a good, healthy life. The Bible tells us that we should earn our bread by the sweat of our face, and that if any man won't work, neither should he eat. In fact, there's a good acronym that we can keep in mind in connection with hard work. If we look at each letter in the words hard work as representing a word, we could put these words with it as an acronym. Healthy attitudes, rightly directed, will obtain righteous knowledge. Hard work, it's a benefit. So think of those things as you have to do these kind of projects, and don't be afraid to get dirty and get used to some good hard work. It's healthy, it's a good outlet for frustrations. In fact, we have good counsel that tells us if we feel frustrated and unhappy and cantankerous, we should get out and chop wood or do something very active and exercise. It will help to release that tension. It helps to keep us in a good frame of mind. Now we've got things pretty well cleaned out here. We've got a good basin. Our outlet level is going to be right about this level here, so that means when we come in we'll have 8 or 10 inches or so in the lowest part of our basin, and that's excellent. Now we need to have our collection apparatus fixed up, and we're going to collect all of the parts for that, and we'll take a look at those next. Now when we are going to be heading up our spring, we want to have all our materials ready, so really you want to be sure to get the different things you'll need before you start digging, or at least before you start cleaning out your spring and ready to head it up. One of the things that you will want is a piece of pipe that can be used for collecting the water, and we have here a piece of 2-inch pipe that works very well. You can use other sizes as well, but I like to use 2-inch pipe or bigger. What we're going to do is measure the length that we need in our spring basin to be able to cover most of the distance in the spring basin. In this case, it's probably going to be not more than about 3 feet, but we'll get a measurement on that. And then when we cut it, we're going to drill holes in this piece, and we're going to drill them on the top half of the pipe all the way around, several rows of holes all the way around. And then we'll put a cap on it. We have a cap that's the right size to fit over the end. Then we'll put adapter on it. We have 2 adapters we're going to have to use here. We have the right size adapters to go down to a 3/4 inch pipe. We'll put those together and put those on the other end, and then we'll hook into that a piece of 3/4 inch pipe. In order to do all of those connections, we need glue and cleaner for this kind of pipe. So you want to be sure to get these things before you start so you have them all on hand and ready to go. So we want to get a measurement to see how long we need our piece of 2-inch pipe to be. We're going to be running our short or our 3/4 inch pipe, our small diameter pipe, through this little narrow place, and then we'll hook into our 2-inch pipe somewhere in here, and we can use a piece that's about 3 feet long without much trouble. So we'll cut a piece about 3 feet long. If we had a longer basin, we could use a longer piece. I've used pieces sometimes that are 4 or 5 or even 6 feet long if we have a long enough basin. But on this one, about 3 feet will be about right. So we'll measure and cut that. For this, it's good to have a hacksaw, or you can use even a carpenter's handsaw. Then we'll want to clean the ends out. You can either use a little pocket knife or just kind of straight